Our first review of the day is going to be for the film Lord of the Rings: War of Rohirrim. It is the story there, an anime film that you have here, and is the latest film in the Lord of the Rings franchise. It's directed by Kenji Kiyama. People might know he's done kind of things like Star Wars Visions. He did a segment on that. If people watched that before, he's also done Ghost in the Shell. He's also done work on that, so he's got a kind of a career there in anime. He's kind of tasked to do this film, and just off the bat, there, it's already been reported that Warner Brothers they already said that they basically did this film. And the only main reason why they did it was to maintain the rights of Lord of the Rings. There to that's they already kind of said that out front there. But they're telling a kind of a new story in J.R. Tolkien's world. There, an untold story. Why is it untold? Well, because they made it the fuck up. So it's expanding there. On there is a family. There is the Rohirrim family that you have there. But the character of Hera is a character that was mentioned, but she was never named. So they gave her a name. They gave her a backstory with this, and she's kind of the focus of this. And her kind of so they mainly focus on her, and then there's also this rivalry that happens between these two families that kind of consumes both these families there. You have the patriarch of the family, who's voiced by Brian Cox, who fits perfectly for this. I mean, he's born to do a role like this with his voice. If people have never heard Brian Cox speak, very booming voice, very deep voice, booming voice. So he's perfect for something like this. And
And
so
that's
yeah,
the only character that is like very much talked about in Tolkien's world already.
yeah, and he voices Helm, who's the patriarch of the family. Yeah, so he, after the dispute there with another leader, another patriarch of another family, and punches him once, kills him. I mean, he's punches the dude once, kills him, and then that sets off a path of revenge for the son. Wolf is the son's name there, who kind of sets off a big path of revenge for him. And then you also have a narrator of this story, who's Miranda Otto, who people know played Eowyn
Mhm.
in the Lord of the Rings there. So she comes
The
on.
credits too, she's listed as Eowyn, so it is literally supposed to be like Eowyn telling like a campfire story almost.
Yeah, and she tells the story of Hera and how she was this free-spirited girl, and she was the fastest rider there, which is probably the most description we get outside of actually the movie, because
Yep.
the movie doesn't really do a lot to expand the character there. I think. Okay, we're gonna get into that.
No, no, it doesn't.
But yeah, so that's kind of the setup of this film there, and then also some Easter eggs there. If you are a fan of the Lord of the Rings lore, there's all that. That's why I also got Sage. I wanted to review this with him because he's a big Lord of the Rings fan there himself. Has a tattoo of Lord of the Rings there. On
Not yet, not yet.
Okay, not yet. Okay, but you're gonna
I
get
will
okay. So he's got
show it
the
off on the show once it happens.
So yes, I wanted him to be involved with that. There are some of that, especially towards the end of the movie there, that kind of comes up there as well, of that. So, yeah, I'm gonna get your thoughts. Sage, what are your thoughts on Lord of the Rings: War of the Rohirrim?
It's mixed. I have very mixed thoughts about it. Let's just talk about the main character right away because we already brought it up. She really, I don't think, has a lot of personality here. Free spirited is about what you get. Um, she really it what I find frustrating at times too is it's the kind of character where it's like the movie really does want you to feel like she's inspiring too. No, I am not. No, no, I am not. But like, so like there's a scene at one point where they're in Helm's Deep. They're holed up there. People are trying to take catalog of the food and supplies, and they're arguing because there's not enough for everybody for how long they think they're gonna be stuck there and trying to figure things out. She walks into the room and she's like, don't be so negative. Stop being negative about things. We're gonna do it because we're gonna figure it out. All right. And she leaves, and I'm like, okay, but that doesn't like produce food. Like having a positive attitude is not producing food. And that kind of, I feel like that's a good microcosm of why I just, her character just, I don't think ever really clicks throughout the whole thing. Because it's a lot of stuff like that where it's just, or her personality just feels like she doesn't really react to things like a person does that much. It's she feels like, I mean, that's the one way in which I can maybe waive that criticism just a little bit is if you really think of it as like a campfire story someone is just telling, and it's not this written down, story or whatever. But even still viewing it, watching it as a movie, like she doesn't go through an arc. She's the same person at the beginning as she is at the end. Like there's no character change or dynamic to really play out there. The one thing I might have liked about it is about her is maybe some of the earlier sequences. There was an almost Princess Mononoke ish
Mm.
type thing of how she's interacting with some of the animals in the world. There's a chase scene with a Mumakil or an Oliphant, which I don't know about you, but I was laughing during parts of that because it's supposed to be like rabid, and it looks so unbelievably angry in some of those shots that is kind of cracking me up.
Mm. Yeah, so that's kind of the big thing about this. Hera obviously is the main character. She's the only daughter there in this family amongst Helm, Hammerhead. So he only had one daughter. He had two other sons that you also see in here. Who the sons were mentioned in the lore there, so they had names and everything like that. Um, so, I mean, I don't mind there being more stuff there, expanding the Jericho token stuff. I get that also, like I said, this was made to basically for them to extend the rights there. They have Warner Brothers to extend the rights of Lord of the Rings and for them to keep on to it. But you can more play in the world and do more stuff with it. And okay, like, I don't know how Lord of the Rings fans feel about Hammerhead and the family or how attached they are to it. But, Hera kind of coming in and then kind of getting her own story there seems kind of fine to me. And you mentioned kind of Princess Mononoke, and the creator of this was inspired by what Hayao Miyazaki did in his films there, like Nausicaa Valley of the Wind. And he's very known for having very strong female protagonists in his work there. So very much inspired by that. And I feel like the movie there, because of much like with things of with female led characters, the thing is like, oh, is it gonna be woke? Is it gonna be she gonna be a girl boss SJW type character? And it seems like it seems like I would kinda much rather prefer that because at least she would have had more character, at least more going on. At least,
Yeah,
she has some action moments, in it, but
some of those are all right, but
it almost was they were afraid to kinda go that territory with her because she gets saved quite a bit a lot. Nothing wrong with getting saved, but she gets saved a lot in here. The skills that she does have because she's not the greatest fighter or anything like that, but they say, like, she's really good with a horse, and she's the fastest, horse rider in all the lands or whatever. That doesn't never
I
come.
feel like I feel like we do get the one moment, but it's in the first act, and then it doesn't, and then she never does anything again. Because I do think her outriding one of the giant elephant creatures, I think that was a pretty impressive feat.
Okay.
But that's at the beginning of the story, and I would think that if you're going to do that, it's set up for her to do something bigger or more impressive with that same skill later, and then she doesn't really. But I do think at least there is that one sequence, so they do use it in a capacity at least.
Yeah. Yeah, you just kinda feel like you wish it played more of a bigger part
Yeah,
into the story and then kind of that because yeah, like, she using her wits and the skills that she does have to kinda do this. So yeah, I think that was kind of a little disappointing. And it's a lot of the movie telling you she's the free spirited and she's this and
yeah.
that, and instead of actually really showing it. I mean, she disagrees with her father and her family in some occasions, like her father's.
I wish she did more. I wish she disagreed with them more. Like, kind of just like, hey, what? Like, I'm gonna press your decision. Even when she disagrees with something he says, she does. I feel like she doesn't put up that much of a fight.
Yeah. I mean, she kind of, interjects her opinion because, Hammerhead, he's all about like, okay, this war is starting and he's a veteran of war. And he's all like, "Well, I've won all these wars before," so he's kind of overconfident. He's like, "Okay, I'm gonna win this one too, and I know about battle and everything like that." So he's kind of coming into it, and she's kind of telling him like, "Well, I kind of know this because she grew up with Wolf as like little kids there, so they've been knowing each other for years." And yeah, and he wants to take her hand in marriage, and she denies that. And that seems like another big part of her character is that she doesn't want to be married off to a man, and that's another big part of the
I
character.
think that would have worked better because they talk about how she's also meant to be she's already kind of supposed to be getting married to this man from Gondor. But you don't see that guy. And I thought if we had maybe had that character in here and maybe got a sense of like, oh well, she doesn't want to be with Wolf for this reason, and maybe she has like a different reason that she doesn't want to be with this other guy, and that would have maybe just helped her to have more of an outlet to express her thoughts and like have opinions about things. But I think especially it's like, well, it's like because like let me put it this way: a story with a character in a love triangle that doesn't want to be with either person in that love triangle could be interesting, and that could be a character dynamic. But setting that up and then having one of those characters just not even actually matter seems like you missed the point of what your own setup was.
Yeah. It's kind of like speaking about stuff about Lord of the Rings since we're on that already there. Because that's what happened with the Hobbit movies. With what's her name? Evangeline Lilly was her name.
Ugh. Uh,
Uh,
don't even get me started. The Toriel character, love it being in love with the Abercrombie and Fitch dwarf.
yeah, I forgot the actor's name. He was in Being Human. He was in the British version of that show. You might watch Being Human. Uh,
I haven't, but
Okay, I forgot his name, but anyway, but he was the sexy dwarf. If you watch The Hobbit, everybody knows who the sexy dwarf is. He was the sexy one. Yeah, he was the sexy dwarf. Who was like, "Hey, I got a little elf in me," right? He was like half elf, half dwarf. I think that was his
was
deal.
he? That's definitely not from the book. I
Okay,
don't
yeah.
even know.
I guess you got to have some immaculate game as a dwarf to pull an elf. I would think you
Right?
probably have to have an immaculate game. But yeah.
I
So
just
anyway,
I'll never forgive that movie for trying to tell me it was real.
But the love triangle was Evangeline Lilly, and it was the sexy dwarf, and then it was Legolas. I think was also the other option, and then of
Who's
course,
also not in the Hobbit book.
yeah, but they had to add in, yeah, because everybody knows Legolas, and Legolas is a badass and everything like that. But so she very much wanted against that. She didn't want to be in a love triangle, but they were like, well, too bad you're in a love triangle, so we need to do it. Um,
I mean, she shouldn't have been in the movie at all. That's
Ulysses said it also happened in Gollum. Gollum was in love triangle with an elf and another mostly off screen elf there.
yeah, that whole thing got weird.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that would have been kind of interesting. Like you said, if she was in a love triangle, she didn't want either of the options there. That would have been good there, at least to have her kind of express that out there. But it's just a lot of going like, that's sometimes the motivation for women. Sometimes there's like personality trait is I don't want to be married off. That's kind of just a
Right.
default personality trait in kind of a medieval time type of thing there.
I'm
Um,
gonna fight for my own hand.
yeah. How did you think about the supporting cast? How do you think about the kind of Brian Cox helm? How do you think about the sons,
So
the family, the villains?
I'm like there's like a 50-50 here. I think I just spent a whole bunch of time being negative. Let me be positive for a second. I think that this movie does do justice to the idea of Helm Hammerhand. I like him here. I think that's executed well. When you do get some like proper action scenes with him at one point in the movie, it's like, well, no wonder he's called Hammerhand, right? Like he, like some of the stuff that he's doing is like that is what I imagine when I read about this character in in like Tolkien's work. Like this is exactly what I picture, what I would want. So yeah, I think he's genuinely really cool. I really like him. Um, I would actually say that the I think the most and this was one of the people I saw the movie with just described it this way, and I thought, oh, that's a good way to look at it. But I liked that at the beginning, Helm Hammerhand is obstinate and disagreeable. Like he's just not giving anyone room to negotiate. He's just really, really hard to almost sympathize with in the first kind of half of the movie. And then Wolf, who is the villain in the first half, he actually is the more understandable character. It's like I get why you're thinking the way that you are, and based on what you have gone through and what you have done and what's happened. And then, kind of about halfway through, watching Helm, Hammerhand, and Wolf kind of flip, which like they kind of flip and go in the opposite direction, and they kind of take each other's place in that sense. And I thought that was a genuinely interesting character dynamic to be played off of. Um, and I think the voice performances for both of them are pretty good. I thought you don't see them a lot, but like the sons are pretty good. I don't remember her name, but there's like an older woman that's like was once a shield maiden
Oh,
in the army.
Olywin. Olywin.
Yeah, I liked her more than the main character even. I thought she actually had personality. Um, but like I said, it's a little 50-50 because while I actually did like all of those characters, there were some other characters in the supporting cast that I'm like, what is your purpose here? Like you could just be cut entirely. Like Hera has like a squire kind of character who's like meant to follow her around and he like moves some stuff for her a couple times and they have like a big dramatic like a goodbye near the end of the movie and I'm like this character felt meaningless. You could just chop him out of the movie altogether. And then okay, and then tell me if this was weird to you or not. But what was up with the evil witch from Snow White just like living in Helm's Deep when no one is there? What was going on with that?
Yeah, that kinda woman there that's, like, from a, uh, uh,
She looks like
Bram
the old
Stoker.
witch at the end of. I mean, I suppose that too, but she really looked like she was gonna be like, "Here's your poison apple, dearie." Like she looked exactly like the old Snow White witch, and I just like it's one thing I could understand. Hey, there's someone that lives there because hey, there have to be supplies maintained, right? Because normally no one's here. It's like a panic room, right? It's Helm's Deep. You don't normally live in Helm's Deep, but she shows up and then there's like this weird scene where she's like, "Ooh, can I have your instrument?" And then they have like a weird conversation about that. And then it seems like she like comes back in the third scene and then she's like dramatically hugging their main character. And I'm like, what relationship is this random old woman? Like, I didn't get that. I really didn't get where that was supposed to or like why that character was there, or like what purpose in the story. So there's some weird side characters in this that I really feel like should have just been cut out
Mhm.
to improve the flow of the story, or give time to characters that I actually did really like. I liked the way they did Helm Hammerhand, and I thought Wolf was one of the more interesting characters in the at least in the first half and kind of that middle section for sure. Um, but yeah, then there's just these other side characters, and I'm like, why are you here? Like, what? There's you serve no purpose.
Yeah. Um, and from the voice cast, it looks like the biggest name in here is Brian Cox. So you mentioned the
Oh, for
former
sure.
Shield maiden, there, Oywin, who's actually married to Andy Serkis, actually
Oh,
there. So
really?
she's actually married to him, and they have kids together. The voice work here, I think, is solid for the most part. There, I think you have. I think, like I said before, I think Brian Cox is doing the best job. I think he just fits for something like this, and his all his
Yeah.
lines are pretty great. Um, Everyone else is also kind of fine. The animation, how did you like the style that they kinda did it in? How did you like that?
So it's weird because I think it looks really good in certain scenes, and then it looks very rough in other scenes. I think in particular it's like scenes where it's all hand drawn and like the backgrounds are also hand drawn. It looks good. And then there's scenes where the characters are 2D and but they're moving through a 3D environment, and those are the scenes where like the blending just doesn't look that great, and so that can be it can kind of take you out of it a bit. Um, so it was like it would go back and forth. Like I think parts of it would look genuinely very good, and then it would just kind of stumble for
Mhm.
sequences. So I don't know. I'm it's mixed on that, but then there's parts of it that I think look good. Like I think that sequence with the elephants, the Muma kill near the beginning, and kind of like the way it chases through like narrow parts of like the jungle. I thought that looked good. But then sometimes like the big battle scenes when there's lots of horses and guys and lots of people moving around, it's like it looks a little rough. It looks a little rough, like trying to kind of match that with the background.
Mm. There's some moments there, like, I agree that some moments look really good, characters
The
and
giant animals look good.
yeah. Like, there's the same with the eagle, they have, like, giant eagle there that it kinda pops up there, looks good. The scene with, like, a deranged elephant that looks really good, but then some moments also the characters look pretty stiff as far as their movements kinda go, and some of the action kinda stuff there that looks kinda off. I don't know if that's just due to the way they fast tracked it and how fast paced kinda things were, so that's man,
Yeah, I mean that's I think you can tell it's a little low budget for sure. Or like they or maybe at least yeah didn't have the time that they needed to kind of really polish it.
yeah. So you kinda get that going on. I mean, because here's some of the animation right here. I've been playing a little bit, but here's some more of it, there. So you kinda got that kinda going on. Um,
I her climbing up the ice wall. I did go like, did they would they have had that sort of would they have had the sort of spiked boots and gear for that? That seems a little modern to throw in. I don't know. That was a small nitpick because it's not like a long moment, but that threw me off a little bit.
yeah. And then you have the villain of the movie, Wolf, who comes in here. His story is that, I mean, he basically just got curved and then he, kinda took that really personally, and then on top of, like, his father kinda dying in front of him, I mean, I don't know, I mean, I get that your
The
dad.
One Punch Man.
Yeah, one pu he died from one punch, like, Jesus. Like, come on, one punch is like I mean, you gotta go to war for your dad there, but also the compound of all that other stuff there, and his just incessant need to, like, you know, it's like keeps going further and further and further there to try to beat, this family and end this family. Did you think his motivation was good? Did you think that was yeah.
I actually did think that that worked pretty well. I mean, I think there's certain scenes of dialogue that I think could have done a better job at presenting it. But like I said, I think the most interesting thing in the story is the way that him and Helm Hammerhand kind of start in opposite places and then flip around the halfway point. But it makes me wish that the within the film story that they would have just maybe gone with Helm Hammerhand as the lead character more, because I think the dynamic between them was interesting, and I did like that. But I think because Hera is such a flat character, it's harder it's harder to buy into the to Wolf as a villain when it's all about her. So like once you really get down to just the two of them closer to the end of the film, I think that's not as interesting. But when we're in like I'd say like the first half to like maybe two-thirds, where it's really Wolf and his hatred of Helm more
Mhm.
specifically, that I think worked. I liked that part of it.
Okay. Yeah. Um, yeah, that's kind of the disappointing thing is, like, this is supposed to be about Hera and about her story, and it feels like it doesn't really become fully her story until the latter part of the movie that where she's kinda, like, gets one because there's the family stuff, and then there's the war kinda going on, um, and her place in the war as far as that kinda goes. I mean, again, she has these good ideas, but she's not very that vocal about them, and then she kinda
And when she is vocal, she tells people to be positive about not having enough food.
yeah, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
be positive, yeah, but watching those, workout videos, I guess, there. So she's kinda got that going, but yeah, I wish there was something more to her character, besides just telling us who she is rather than showing us who she is, and that's
Or that they went with or Helm as the protagonist instead of her. Like if you have an interesting character, maybe maybe swap that out. Like I maybe they didn't have time to do rewrites or multiple drafts or spend that time kind of figuring out what's working in the creative process. But I don't know. If I was making it and I wrote that story and I was reading it back to myself and I was like, yeah, she's not that great, I guess. Now that I'm looking at this again, I would just have changed who was the main character. I just would have changed that altogether.
Mm, yeah. So what would be your final thoughts and rating for Lord of the Rings: War of the Ring?
Well, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like it's I definitely had hoped for something better than what we got. But I also don't think this is all bad either. I think there's some good stuff here. I think Helm of Hammerhand, who again is he's the main character that is a pre-existing figure in the mythology. I do think they did him justice. I liked him, and I liked that element of it. I think there are some good action scenes. I think Helm's dynamic with the villain is actually pretty good. Um, and as some of the other supporting cast I like. But yeah, the main character really does kind of fall flat, and that hurts a lot of it. Um, all in all, I think it's just decent. I'm not going to tell anybody they need to see this, but I also didn't think it was bad either. I think it had stuff that was worth seeing it for. I wasn't unhappy at the end of it, so I'd give it like a regular, maybe high stream it.
Okay. What did you think about the connection? Because this is supposed to be what, a couple of 100 years before the events of
I think they say 200. Yeah.
200?
Yeah, the stuff at the end where they were like, they really started trying to be like, ooh, but remember, this is a prequel. I hated that. I hated that stuff. I really did not like that.
Yeah. I don't wanna
Felt
spoil it for
totally,
anybody who hasn't seen it, but there's some stuff that comes back in that connects to Lord of the Rings and some people that show up, and there's that,
yeah, they didn't need any of that. You could have cut that entirely, and I probably would give the movie like another half point if that
yeah,
stuff wasn't in there.
that's the curse of a prequel and especially a franchise. They feel like, "Oh, we gotta include these characters because hey, people like these characters, and we gotta bring them back, and we gotta show them off." It's like, I don't really get
I hate that is a, because you're right, it is a prequel curse, but it doesn't have to be.
it.
Like it
Yeah.
just so doesn't have to be. You didn't need to mention any of those things within in this. Like it didn't have to be there. You could 100% this it would have been better for not having those things in it. So I don't get why there is always this instinct that has to be the case.
Yula says, "Does Legolas ride in on a giant bat and stab the bad guys to death?" Not in
You
this
know
one.
what? It I will say it does not do it is not as egregious as what The Hobbit did. Its callbacks to the other movies are still better than the ones that are in the Hobbit movies.
Yeah. So yeah, I kinda with you here. I just think it's kinda just fine. I kinda had higher hopes for this movie there. That it kinda was gonna be more of an epic story, epic movie there. And it's just fine. It's just okay. Kinda every sense of the word. I wish Hera was a better character if she is gonna be the lead in this. Um, I wish the animation was slightly better in some spots. It's solid for what it is there. I wouldn't mind another Lord of the Rings project to do more kinda animated projects, animate stuff like that. But I do think it being kind of fast tracked and made like that, I think that kinda hurt it maybe a little bit there. Uh, some solid things about it, but yeah, I think it is better than the previous Lord of the Rings stuff we've gotten, like the Hobbit movies. I think it is better than that. The past, especially like Battle of the Five Armies, like that was just nonsense at the end
Well,
there.
yeah, that was unwatchable garbage. I'm sorry, that movie was just trash.
But yeah, so that's kind of my things with it. So I just kind of give it a high stream it, low tune in around that territory. Yeah, maybe like high stream it, low tune in around that territory there for it. That's kind of about it. And then kind of some of the references towards the end about like Lord of the Rings and hey, the lead up to the next thing. That's kind of like yeah, you didn't really need to do that with it. I thought that was kind of weird. And then they brought back a person, and it's like, I'm not. Yeah, that's kind of weird that you would do that.
Yeah, they didn't. I will say it at least it wasn't AI. It was like actual archive like audio, like
Mm,
real archive audio. So it wasn't as bad as like what Alien Romulus did or some of the Star Wars movies where they're just like, this person's been dead for 40 years. Let's drag them out. At least it was like this guy actually did make this thing and it's like sat in an archive, you know. At least I didn't think it was as bad as like some of the other examples, but but I agree that it still felt super unnecessary.
Yeah. So, to stream it for Lord of the Rings, War of Rohirrim. There, it's in theaters now.